I'm calling to order the meeting for the Planning Board of April 1st, 2020.
Okay, I'm just going to do the roll call just to make sure that everybody is here and connected. I think we tried to make sure technical issues are addressed before 7, but just want to make sure everybody's here. So, Bonnie?
Here.
Leah?
You had just asked us to mute ourselves, so.
Sorry, here.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. You'll have to unmute yourselves if you're already not muted. Don Walters?
Here.
Ann Gardner?
Here.
Beth Delisle? Oh, I see your hand. Yeah, okay. James Bruger?
Here.
MJ?
Here.
Rick?
Here.
Tanya?
Here. Here.
Oh, hi, Tanya. Did we get Rick? Are you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Here.
Okay, great. And I haven't seen Linda yet. Maybe she'll, oh, there she is. It looks like she's on. Linda, are you able to unmute yourself and say hello?
Hello, everybody.
Hi, Linda. Thank you. And I know we have Caitlin Sullivan here as well.
Hi, Andy. Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
Okay, so it looks like we've got the full complement tonight. Thank you. I think I'll just give a little bit of introduction to, we have a little bit of an unusual change of circumstances because of COVID-19. So I thought a little bit of context might be helpful, obviously for the board members, but even for the general public. And other public members might be joining in at future meetings based on the content of meetings, maybe more so than even tonight. But I thought it might be helpful just to explain that tonight's meeting is really just for administrative purposes, and that's to approve prior meeting minutes, to approve application materials that have been submitted as complete, and to schedule or continue items that are presently listed on tonight's agenda to another meeting date several weeks out. This is to maintain the continuity of the board's proceedings on various permits and public hearings for the benefit of both the applicant and the other interested parties. It will also provide additional time for us as city officials to adapt to holding hearings online if public meetings, as what's referred to as social gatherings, are prohibited for weeks or months longer, which for what I can tell is going to be several months, it looks like to me. That's obviously changing every day from what we hear. There's going to be no real substantive discussion of the projects or applications that are listed on tonight's agenda. So as such, there won't be any public comment period this evening. Public comment will be provided at the future continuations of any public hearings that the board has, but there just aren't any tonight. In the interim, questions regarding particular projects or applications that anyone has should be directed to the Office of Planning and Development. We would recommend using email for now because it's a little easier than responding to voicemail. Most information is on the city's website, so hopefully folks will be able to find that sort of thing. Bonnie, I don't know if you wanted to offer anything at this point yourself or...
No, I just think for convenience of board members and the general public, it'd be good if you would guide us through tonight's agenda with the recommendations from your office, okay?
Sure, yeah, that's a little helpful online, more so even than in the room. So looking at tonight's agenda, the first thing that the board has is 20 Graff Road. It's an application completeness vote. This is pretty typical before the board has a hearing on an application, in this case, site plan approval, that the board confirm that the application materials submitted are complete. So an application for site plan review was submitted for the property at 20 Graff Road. Staff has recommended that the application materials are complete and that they have been routed to various city departments, and the board's consulting engineer as well, Phil Christensen, for a review and comment. While we would normally take an application completeness vote followed by a public hearing at the next available planning board date, which in this case would be April 15th, we've opted to schedule a public hearing on May 20th in the hopes that having additional time to flesh out the format of online meetings, while also taking into account the updates relative to COVID-19 that may, at that time, we'll find out, allow an in-person public hearing. So accordingly, I would now recommend that in light of the COVID-19 outbreak and the response, various emergency declarations that have been issued both at the city and the state level, and the need to limit social distancing for several weeks, that the board entertain a single motion to find the application complete and schedule the required public hearing on this application for May 20th. And I'm happy to offer the form of that motion for the convenience of the board.
So moved.
Second.
I have a question before we vote.
Mhm.
Yes.
This is for site plan review completeness vote, but the hearing is for both site plan review and a special permit for use. Is that correct?
Yes, sorry, we're covered. Both of these are being covered at the same time, the completeness vote, yeah.
Okay, I'd just like that to be reflected in the minutes so that we see both applications identified.
All right, Bonnie, what are the two applications again?
Site plan review and special permit for use.
Okay,
Thank you.
Does my motion still stand?
Yeah,
Leah, was that you?
Yes, that was me, Linda.
Okay, thanks.
And I seconded it.
And who is that?
Okay.
Me, Tanya?
Got it.
Okay,
And now-
I'll do a roll call on that vote, if that's right, Chair?
yes,
Okay. So Bonnie,
yes,
Leah,
Yes.
Ann,
Yes.
Don,
Yes.
Beth? Oh, go audio, I guess. Could you just wave your hand if that's a yes? Oh, thank you. Okay. And you can also use the chat box as well. I'll monitor that as well. James Bruger,
Yes.
MJ,
Yes.
Rick,
Yes.
and Tanya.
Yes.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is an application. It's another completeness vote for an application that's been submitted. There's several different properties involved, so it's actually 8, 10, 12, and 18 Colby Farm Lane. The application was submitted for those properties, and it includes the definitive subdivision application, a site plan review, a special permit that's the so-called 6C, and an OSRD special permit as well. The staff have already determined from our perspective that the application is complete, and we've routed to various city departments as usual for comment, and the board's consulting engineer. And as I've said earlier this evening, while we would normally take an application completeness vote, in this case, one that would have actually occurred at the last canceled planning board meeting on March 18th, followed by a public hearing at the next available planning board meeting date, which would have been tonight, we've opted to schedule this public hearing for May 20th in the hopes that additional time will allow us to flesh out the format for online hearings while taking into account updates relative to COVID-19 that might at that time allow an in-person public hearing. We'll obviously find out more information as we get closer. So accordingly, I would now recommend that in light of the COVID-19 outbreak and response, various emergency declarations, and the need to limit social distancing for several weeks, that the board follow a two-step process to deem the application as complete, that being the first vote, followed by opening the associated public hearing that was advertised for tonight with an immediate motion to continue that hearing until May 20th. And I'm happy to offer the form of these motions sequentially for the convenience of the board.
thank you. Please do.
So on the first one, it would be a motion to deem the application complete as submitted for 8, 10, 12, and 18 Colby Farm Lane. Would any member of the board like to make that motion?
So moved.
Who was that?
And was that Don?
It was Don.
Thank you.
Second, Ann?
All right, thank you, Ann. I'm just going to do a roll call vote on that one as well. That's required for remote participation on our votes here, just to make sure the record is clear. So Bonnie,
Yes,
Leah,
Yes.
Ann,
Yes.
Don,
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. James,
Yes.
MJ,
Yes.
Rick,
Yes.
and Tanya.
Yes.
Thank you.
We'll now open the scheduled public hearing for 8, 10, 12, and 18 Colby Farm Lane advertised for this evening, which includes definitive subdivision, site plan review, 6C special permit, and an OSRD special permit. Andy, would you offer the form of the motion you noted earlier, please?
Sure. So this second motion would be to continue this public hearing without any presentation, deliberation, or public comment until the board's regularly scheduled meeting at 7 p.m. on May 20th, 2020. Said hearing shall be located either in the City Hall auditorium or online via remote participation, with confirmation of access information to be posted on the city's calendar accordingly, pending further guidance we get on the COVID-19 protocols. So all interested parties should look to the meeting's calendar on the city website as May 20th approaches. Would any member of the board like to make that motion?
I'll make that motion.
And I'm sorry, who was that again?
That was Leah.
Oh, Leah, thank you. All right, it's a little hard to tell. Thank you. And then second?
Second, Rick.
Rick, thank you. Okay, I'm just going to do another roll call on that one. Bonnie?
Yes.
Leah?
Yes.
Ann?
Yes.
Don?
Yes.
Beth?
Yes.
James?
Yes.
And MJ?
Yes.
Yes.
And Tanya?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, we are at the point where we are going to approve the minutes by review first of March 4th. That's our last administrative item on the evening's agenda. And Linda has provided a draft meeting minutes for us. Are there any changes or edits that anyone would like to make?
This is Don Walters. I would like to make a proposed change to the minutes, which would be along the following lines. Subsequent to the meeting, Don Walters was ineligible to vote. Therefore, he abstained, and the vote was 6. Approve 6. Just change the numbers is what I'm suggesting.
Okay.
Sorry, are you referring to the whole agenda or specific items?
Just a vote for 3 Boston Way. I'm sorry, 3 Boston Way.
Okay.
I was ineligible to vote, but I voted, so Linda recorded 7 positive, including me. So she should put me in the abstain column, in the abstain place.
Thank you, Don.
Are we looking at March 11th or March 4th?
March 4th.
March 4th.
Okay. Excuse me while I go find it. I'm sorry if it messes up everybody else's screen.
We don't see it.
Oh, you don't?
Nope.
Okay. This is 3 Boston Way. Is that correct?
Right. And so Don was
Right.
not, yeah.
Got it.
I had 3 small minor changes that I sent to Linda and Bonnie earlier today.
I got them. Thank you very much.
Are there any other amendments? Okay, with those changes in mind, I'd like to have a motion to approve as amended.
So moved.
All right.
That was Rick?
That was Rick.
Second, please.
I'll second.
Second it. Oh, sorry, MJ, you got it.
Okay, thank you, MJ.
Okay.
All right, I got it.
Okay, just do a roll call on that one. Bonnie,
Yes.
Leah,
Yes.
Ann,
Yes.
Don,
Yes.
Yes.
James,
Yes.
MJ, MJ.
Yes,
Oh, thank you.
yes, sorry.
Oh, thank you. Rick
Yes.
and Tanya.
Yes.
Great. Bonnie, I don't know if there was any other items you wanted to cover or discuss. I know it's a little bit unusual context. Might help for the board to discuss some future agenda items or how we're handling things. So I'll defer to you on that.
Okay, I just wanted to comment on two issues that we have listed for discussion and follow-up from our previous agendas. One has to do with the joint public hearings that are scheduled right now for April 15th on short-term rentals, which is a continuation, and a new one, DOD fences, and there was something else involved with that, but basically fences. We are going to meet that night. The plan now is to administratively handle that as well and continue them. I just wanted to clarify on the short-term rentals. I take full responsibility for giving you incorrect information when we had the first joint public hearing on that. I told members who were there that we would have an opportunity to discuss the responses from the public and our comments during the planning board meeting before the next meeting of the joint public hearing. And I was wrong. We can't do that administratively and legally. So what I'm going to recommend is that when we eventually have that joint public hearing, we make our comments at that time. And that if we decide either of the two options that involve not approving or recommending for approval the amendment, that we still have 21 days after the close of the hearing to go through in detail what our positions are and our recommendations to City Council. If you remember, that's what we did with the first proposed amendment on the Waterfront West Overlay District. So I'd like us to follow that procedure on this as well. And if I haven't been clear or you have any questions about what we're going to be doing procedurally, I'd be happy to hear what they are and respond right now.
Bonnie, this is Ann. I have a question. It seems like a lot of people, particularly members of the council, have been working on amending that. Are there any written revisions or anything that people can review before the public meeting continues, or how will that be addressed?
Yeah, I could probably speak to that.
Okay,
Sorry.
go ahead. Yeah, I was just going to say, I don't know them personally, but I'd like Andy to respond to that, especially procedurally, because we are not discussing it outside of the public hearing process at this point.
Thank you. Yeah, so I have spoken to Heather Shan, the chair of the Planning and Development Committee. I know Bonnie has been in touch with her as well. I have to reach out to Jim, who's been the primary sponsor on the council about that. But generally speaking, we're in agreement. We're going to continue that hearing into May. I know that right before things were largely shut down because of COVID-19, we had planned on working together, Jim and I, and the rest of my staff, and the other, Charlie Tonter, Bonnie, obviously, some folks who had been involved in discussions about this sort of ordinance some time ago, to try to work on a draft, an updated draft for your review prior to that public hearing. Obviously, our work on that was delayed a couple of weeks because of what's been going on, but we do plan on getting back to that and trying to get to you an updated version that at least attempts to address the issues that have been raised to date, to the best of our ability anyway. There is obviously still the policy debate about that ordinance, but at least to try to address some of the mechanical issues that have been raised.
Andy, so that draft, would that also be available to the public via the website or something?
Yes, thank you, and that's a good question. Right now, and I think it's through the end of April, I've been talking with Diane about this. We've been using this Engage Newburyport platform to sort of roll out zoning changes and other planning updates. We've had sort of mixed feelings about how useful that platform has been or how much more it adds to our existing city website. So we are going to revert that content back to the city's website, including, all the planning board pages, the planning and development department pages. So all that content will come back, and those pages include an ordinance change for the short-term rentals and, of course, other amendments that are being proposed. So yes, it will include that, and I have talked to Jim at least about that, and I think there's general agreement that we want to get that draft out for the board's review in advance of the meeting and the general public, so that everybody can be apprised as early as possible on the proposed edits.
That's great. Thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions or comments? Well, I do.
I do.
You do? Okay. Go ahead, Don.
Yes, Andy, in my opinion, I find this go-to meeting extremely easy. And I think, not saying you don't want to use Zoom, but assuming we're going to be having more protracted meetings with more participation, both from the public as well as input from my fellow planning board members, what I don't see on this, and I've used go-to meetings many times probably as most of us have, I don't see where the hand raising is, because I think right now it's okay, but I think when we have more, more people and even our members we want to do, I think there needs to be some type of control where you say, well, whether you go in order or something, but I don't see raise your hand on my go-to meeting screen. Perhaps I don't have the correct version.
Yeah. No, John, you're 100% right with that, actually. And that's actually one of the primary reasons working with my staff sort of use them as guinea pigs on testing out the platform. We were originally, it was suggested that we try out GoTo. There was sort of a free access we were given to it. But I wanted to try that out before using it with the boards at all. And we did discover that was one of the key reasons why I felt that Zoom works better. We did a trial run of Zoom after we had done GoTo. We obviously ramped up quickly with GoTo, but that is one of the primary reasons that Zoom works better, because there is a hand-raising feature, and the moderator can more easily keep track of who's ready to speak or who'd like to speak and work with the chair on that. GoTo from the moderator's side or my end is not quite as good at doing that and doesn't have that hand-raising feature. So that's one of the reasons why Zoom also we found works better for audio for most people.
Thank you.
Back to short-term rentals and this whole process of public hearing and outside deliberation. Andy, I still don't understand how it's possible to put forward another draft of the zoning amendment while the current public hearing is still open.
Yeah, sorry, just to clarify, what that is it's really the same as the sponsoring counselor essentially saying, here's the updated draft I'm working on. I'll have to defer to Jim and Charlie, who are the primary sponsors in the council, as to what they feel comfortable sponsoring, but our goal is to work together on something that we, the office, and the sponsoring counselors can say this is an updated version to help out the public participation process at the next meeting. That is not atypical to work on those things. What I don't know is whether or not the revisions that our office is working on will be entirely consistent with what the sponsors are looking for. We'll try to work together on that, but the goal is to have really one version that you're looking at. Same as other ordinance you might be working on, say, if it was Waterfront West or some other issue that was more complicated, debating the content of those revisions at a future hearing date because the prior version wasn't good enough at the first meeting.
Well, we are talking about the zoning ordinance and not the licensing ordinance. I know planning board members, including myself, have some updates or revisions that we'd like to see in there as well. And I'm wondering how we can put those in there for review at the next public hearing. to be consistent with what the city council is doing. Are we not allowed to do that?
Oh, thank you. That's a good point. Thanks for you. Yeah. So for that nuanced question, it's recommended generally both by our office and by legal counsel that the board not discuss, matters that are in some sort of hearing, whether that be a zoning change or a permit application, outside of the formal public hearing that's been advertised for that. So that's the reason for not having that discussion that way. But there is a good way for board members to try to get insertion of, certain issues addressed. So for instance, Rick had to distribute a good number of comments in advance of the last meeting. There were a few other folks, I think Stephanie Nikitek, from the outside the board, had given some comments as well. So our goal is to try to synthesize all those comments that have come in to the best of our ability and merge those together into a revised document that we, the office, thinks is better addresses those concerns. It won't address necessarily the policy questions that the city council and the planning board need to make a policy decision about, what to regulate and how. But we'll try to address all those mechanical issues based on all the feedback we get. So any planning board members that haven't already commented on it or sent something to the office, I would recommend that you do that, and that way we can try to incorporate that or synthesize that. If for some reason, we're not able to synthesize that, we're happy to have individual exchanges about the content of your recommendations. But if for some reason it's not something that we can incorporate or think it makes sense to do, then you're certainly welcome to bring that up during the public hearing. But our attempt is to try to get all that merged together. That's a good way of getting some of your concerns into that mix a little faster without violating the open meeting law by having deliberations about a matter with other board members. In this case, you're having that exchange with the staff, so we can try to work on that prior to the next board meeting. We would then distribute that as the staff's recommendation, what those changes are, and like I said, hopefully in conjunction with the two sponsoring council members.
Okay, that answers my question. Any further questions on short-term rentals process?
Yes, I do have a question. And it actually has to do with actually the process. Obviously, the license ordinance and the zoning ordinance are inextricably linked, and they're being heard by different committees. So do you have any insight into how the License and Permitting Committee is going to be handling their process, and whether these amendments to the two separate ordinances are going to be going forward together, or are they going to be diverging from each other?
Yeah, that's a great question. I do think, and we have discussed the importance, because like you said, they're so intertwined, the importance of actually doing that together and not bringing one piece forward for adoption until the other one is ready as well, and make sense together, because they are, like you said, inextricably linked together. So I think there was agreement that needs to be that needs to happen simultaneously, and that one should not move ahead. The planning board's more simple portion of the ordinance versus the other ordinance, which is about the licensing commission. Really, I think there's general agreement about that, and I think there'll be an attempt. I have to talk to Heather Shand, and I think it's Joe Devlin, the chair of the license and permits, just to touch base on whether they want to merge their committee hearings together. What they usually do is post that as what they call a committee of the whole, which is where the whole council can essentially attend, because they have more than a quorum of either their subcommittees or the whole council. So I would expect that to happen, so that, because like you said, these are inextricably linked, that they will be able to do that by having their committee of the whole meeting. And because I agree with you, I think they need to be discussed together rather than in two totally separate council committees.
Thanks.
Anyone else like to speak on this topic? Okay, the one other update I have for you is I have talked to Councilor Shand about the Waterfront West Overlay District joint working session that was meant to happen after each of the Planning and Development Committee meetings. That's 2 a month. And we've decided to put that on hold. We haven't started yet, and it would be a whole lot easier if we could do that face-to-face in a normal meeting setting. Obviously, since we don't know how long our current situation is going to run on for, we may have to revise that decision. But right now, we've decided to just put it on hold and not move forward with it until such time as we either can figure out how to do it online, or we're back looking at each other in the same room. So that's the only update I have on that.
Quick
Are there any? Yeah.
Quick question on that, Bonnie. I assume that NED is not moving in any agendas forward, so we're not lagging behind by not addressing this.
No.
Okay.
And
That's what I figured.
and that's all I had for updates. Does anyone else on the board have any questions or updates that they want to hear about?
I guess, is all construction in Newburyport on hold?
No, I think, to my knowledge, it's actually work that's generally related to public safety or so forth is allowed to be permitted or do right now. But other than that, I think contractors have been asked to hold off on their work or directed to hold off on their work. But I think that anything related to safety or enclosures of buildings is being allowed to be worked on, I believe. But I'll defer to the building commissioner on more detail.
Andy, we just got, I just got something from our attorney today that said that with the governor's extension of the order, the executive order, that anything related to mixed use and residential housing could still be constructed, that was considered essential. So, so any inspections that have to happen with that, any construction that has to happen with that, so things like the 40R, the Minco project, like all of that could still continue to go on because those workers are considered essential.
Thank you, Tanya, for adding and correcting me on that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
because
that's
we were looking at that
interesting,
for some other projects.
I drove by there today and there were only a few workers on the roof. And I wondered, it looked like maybe they were just, buckling things down. It didn't look like a full crew. So
think
that's
that's-
interesting.
Yeah, I mean,
It's
they might
fairly
be
new. It
able
just
to
came out
legally
yesterday.
work, but still have a, yeah.
Yeah. And
I'm
also,
sorry.
there also, Andy, you may want to check, but there also was some new legislation that just came through about permitting and about tolling of permits. And so I think that that's kind of an interesting, because from what my understanding is anything that is sort of in process, so any of these public hearings and whatnot are tolling until the executive order is done.
Tanya, can I ask,
actually,
what word are you using? Are you saying tolling?
Tolling, as far as like tolling, the permits are all tolling. It's just a tolling.
Tolling like the number of
Meaning
days,
that
counting
any
the
of
number of
our
days.
any decisions, so if you had a decision, it would toll. So if we didn't make a decision, if we didn't make a vote on a public hearing, then it would toll until the executive order, the state of emergency is over. Andy, have you heard anything from your legal team on that?
Yeah, so we've been monitoring that, and we're hoping for an update, in the next day or two on this. But generally speaking, there are different things that have been done, and there's a little confusion for folks that aren't directly involved. There's a little bit of confusion over which is which. So the governor has taken action on, to my knowledge, what he can do. He may be working on other things, I don't know, but he has taken action under the open meeting law, what he can do as governor. But because of the statutes that are actually adopted by the legislature as well, he can't control those directly himself entirely unilaterally. Those statutory deadlines are the ones that I think you're referring to there about when applications come in and whether or not there's a tolling of the number of days, postponing essentially the need for the board to act or hold a hearing or whatnot. That's something that we're waiting for the legislature to act on there. I think there's a House bill that was voted and approved. There's a Senate bill that was voted and approved, and now they're working, I think, committee on what might come out as a third numbered bill to basically merge those together in some way, so that we're expecting in the next day or two or a couple of days anyway to have some sort of resolution of that for a tolling effect on the number of days. We'll obviously use that as necessary to deal with the situation here. But one of the things I think is important to point out here is there's the public policy issue of trying to make sure we can get to public hearings in person, and then there's the reality check, which is that based on what we're hearing in the news and the time frame it's going to take to do those things, and Tanya, as you pointed out, some people can't proceed with certain work. My position has generally been that where the technology is working properly and we can reasonably provide the public access the way that we can to the board members, there's really nothing legally that prevents us from doing our processes online, and the city council is actually doing that on their substantive matters right now as well. The city of Salem, for instance, has permitting boards doing their work right now. They had a meeting tonight overlapping this one. So I've been checking out and seeing how other people are doing things. But I think as we approach May, and certainly by May, we should be trying to do our business online if we have to keep things moving along. There are certain things that I think make sense to continue if need be to try to get a hearing in person, because there are projects that are more controversial or bigger in nature, and that's a little hard to manage, that kind of interest online. But we can do some things online, and we are waiting for the legislature to follow the governor in passing legislation that will help to toll the dates, so we're not under these pressures and deadlines unnecessarily.
Yeah, and I think, my feeling is that things like that are not necessary, like the zoning changes, like and things like waterfront bus, like I feel like those are things that maybe we should hold off on until we can get a public meeting. But that would be in my opinion.
I agree, and yeah, I agree, and we've actually agreed to extend both those hearings into May, and I would not be surprised if the sponsoring counselors are interested in pushing that hearing out further if we get to that point and cannot have an in physical person meeting. So.
Mm-hmm.
Andy, do you have any updates other than what's already been discussed?
No, it's one thing, technically I wanted to mention to you, I think as I mentioned earlier, for some of you trying to just make sure your technical connections were working, we have been, staff looking at Zoom in favor over GoToMeeting because we find that it works better, not just for us to moderate a meeting where we might have, as I mentioned just a second ago, public hearings where there might be a big turnout, and if we need to do hearings online, we have a better ability to deal with, as Dawn mentioned, raising hands or managing the audience, allowing folks to speak in turn, and so forth. So there are some other pros and cons to both platforms, but that's one reason why you might see at one of our upcoming meetings a Zoom link instead of a GoTo link, and we'll clarify that obviously, and we might give you a few tidbits that are different than GoTo as you're making a connection, but we have found it to work better. We've done a couple of trial runs, and so we're planning on following that. We found a lot of others to do that as well. Other than that, if there's any questions, we the staff are going to continue to try to respond to things. Email is obviously the easiest way for us to respond right now. It's a little crazy, like I'm sure every other profession is right now, but we're managing, and we're trying to work cooperatively with everybody to recognize their needs to try to permit things in a timely way, with the balancing out the public health and due process that people should be afforded for public comment.
Okay, are we ready for a motion to adjourn? May I have a motion to adjourn, please?
I move
Tanya?
to adjourn.
That's Tanya? Is that Tanya?
Is there a second?
I did. So if anyone wants to second it, go ahead.
Second.
I'll second.
James, thank you. All those in favor, we have to do a roll call. Andy.
Yeah, Bonnie?
Andy, are you going to do a roll call? Are you going to do a roll call on adjournment?
Yeah, checking you first.
Oh, yes.
Okay, thank you. Leah?
Yes.
Ann?
Yes.
Don?
Yes.
Beth?
Yes.
James?
Yes.
MJ?
Yes.
Rick?
Yes.
And Tyler?
Yes.
Okay, meeting's adjourned.